G'day, this is Guy Emu, and welcome to Guy E News. Today I'm going to be reading the Jason Schreier article on Bloomberg on the development of Cyberpunk 2077. Now, I've already read through it. I've highlighted the big points, and I've got my thoughts on it. I've got kind of a gist of what the general reception about this is. And yeah, it's not good. It's not good at all. It's a lot worse than I thought it was, actually. Not as bad as people are saying it is. Like I heard Skill Up compare it to the development of Anthem, which is just ridiculous because the development of Anthem was just absolutely completely botched from just a basic design and leadership standpoint. But it seems that this game had a vision, but it had conflicting visions as well. Anyways, let's move on to this travesty. Okay, so a lot of the stuff at the beginning is just a bunch of setup, talking about the apology video, talking about the launch, talking about the response. But this is where it really begins. Interviews with more than 20 concurrent and former CD Projekt staff, most of whom requested anonymity as to not risk their careers, depict a development process marred by unchecked ambition, poor planning, and technical shortcomings. Now, this is a problem I have with the gaming industry. Is why the fuck do developers are so afraid of being reprimanded just for telling the truth? Why can't studios just look on this criticism and go, okay, we can take this on board and become better? Instead, no, they punish their employees. They punish their employees for telling the truth, for speaking out. They sign fucking internal NDAs, and they try and do internal investigations, and people who sign up for these internal investigations literally cannot go to court or talk about the stuff publicly. It's ridiculous. I hate in the industry that we live in. It's just you tell the truth, you criticize your work company, and you're basically on a blacklist. That's ridiculous to me. Anyways, employees discussing the game's creation for the first time described a company that focused on marketing at the expense of development, and an unrealistic timeline that pressured some into working extensive overtime long before the final push. CD Projekt declined to comment on the process or provide interviews for the story. Why? Why CDPR? Why can't you just talk to us? You're telling us that you want to be transparent, that you want to get better and do your due diligence and talk to us, but not talking to Jason Schreier about this is basically saying that all of that was a lie. You're lying to us by not talking to this man because you're withholding more than you're telling us, essentially. Anyways, this wasn't how the development team envisioned starting 2021. Now, instead of celebrating a successful release, they will aim to turn Cyberpunk into a redemption story, and blah 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 blah. Already was well known for an earlier blockbuster title, Witcher 3 and Keanu Reeves and all that fucking bullshit. I think Jason is kind of bloating this article with a lot of unnecessary background info. I think he should just hit with the regular stuff. It must be some sort of quota by Bloomberg. Fuck Bloomberg, by the way. The only reason why they hired him is because they were going to pay him more, because Kotaku are fucking crap on their own. I'd rather him just have his own website, because this is just ridiculous. I'm sure people would donate to him because they love his work. Anyways, in his message, Ivinsky concedes that the company underestimated the task. He said that because the game city was so packed and the disk bandwidth of old-gen consoles is what it is, it constantly challenged us. While the company extensively tested before the game's release, Ivinsky said it didn't show many of the issues players experienced. Developers who worked on the game argued otherwise, saying that many common problems were discovered, The staff just didn't have time to fix them. Yes, I know that. I mean, it's good that he's telling us this, but like, it was so obvious. Like, when Marcin said that they didn't experience the same issues, I was like, bullshit. Absolutely no way. Like, that, it was like a joke excuse that I came up with where I said, like, oh, they must have just uploaded the wrong build by accident. They're not that dumb. And clearly they're not, because it's obvious from this that they knew that these issues were here. They just didn't have enough time. Anyways, another indication of how CDPR stretched things too far was it tried to develop the engine technology behind Cyberpunk 2077. That's a big red flag, most of which was brand new simultaneously with the game, which slowed down production. One member of the team compared the process to trying to drive a train while the train tracks are being laid in front of you at the same time. It might have gone more smoothly if the track layers had a few months head start. That's a big fucking no-no. Like, the developer friend that I had, the guy that's working on Postal 4, I mentioned in that playthrough that, you know, he works there and he's a really smart guy. But the thing is, he actually makes engines as well. He works with engines. He's worked with a lot of engines, even the build engine. Yeah, I think it's called the build engine, the thing that they used for like Morrowind and stuff. And he doesn't even think that engine is that bad. He does this. He does this thing where he implements features along the way as he implements like engine features as he's making his games. But he is a one-man team and he does this in his own time. So he's got all the time in the world. There are more issues with this that come up later. When you're strapped for time, implementing features as you're making a game is so unrecommended that I'm actually surprised that they were doing this for a game this big. It actually shocked me. I was like, that's probably the biggest problem with the development from this article, really. Let's say Adrian Jakubiak, a former audio programmer for CD Projekt, said one of his colleagues asked during a meeting how the company thought it would be able to pull off a technically more challenging project at the same time frame as The Witcher. Someone answered, we'll figure it out along the way, he said. A lot of game development is figuring it out along the way, but when you are making your engine at the same time, you don't have the framework to figure it out along the way. You don't have the support to figure it out along the way. There is no time and there is no vision. Anyways, Via's CD Projekt have thrived on mentality, but this time the company wasn't able to pull it off. I knew it wasn't going well, said Jakubiak. I just didn't know how disastrous it would be. Part of the fans' disappointment is proportional to the amount of time they spent waiting for the game. Although Cyberpunk was announced in 2012, the company was then still mainly focused on its last title, and full development didn't start until 2016. And that's still a long time. 4 years is actually like a little bit longer than standard development cycle, usually 2 to 3 years. But it seems that they didn't have the framework. Like I said earlier, the engine was being made at the same time, was being upgraded at the same time. But that was then CD Projekt essentially hit the reset button, according to people from the project. Studio head Adam Badowski took over as director, demanding overhauls to Cyberpunk's gameplay and story. The next year, everything was changing, including fundamental elements like the gameplay perspective. Top staff who had worked on The Witcher 3 had strong opinions on how Cyberpunk should be made, which clashed with Badowski and led to an eventual departure of several top developers. A lot of companies and developers like to say that departures are just a normal part of the development cycle. I don't believe that. I think if important people of a development are leaving during development of a project, something's wrong. In almost all cases, something is wrong. It happened with Halo. It happened with Anthem. It happened with Destiny. And these are all talented studios. There is no excuse. it's always bad when leads leave a project. And here's something that I think people don't really understand, or people like don't really like have the big picture about, and it's something that Jason likes to exaggerate a lot, and that's how like when he uses strong language like demanding overhauls. Like overhauls happen all the time. Like Doom 2016, that game got a major overhaul. That game was cancelled and then rebooted under the same team, and it became a fantastic fucking game. And there is no like horror stories about id Software. And the reason for that is because like that's just how development is. Overhauls happen all the time, and demanding is especially strong language when there's nothing else in this article that dictates Adam Badowski is this tyrant. Conflicting opinions and conflicting visions happen all the time. Overhauls happen all the time. I doubt that Adam Badowski came into this and was like, bulldoze everything, just fucking get rid of everything and just make the game that I want. I doubt that's what happened. I'm sure that there was a foundation and a vision, and he just put things on a different train track. I'm sure that Adam Badowski just didn't jump in and go like, "Fuck you all, my game now." I'm really sure that's not what happened, because that's the language that Jason is using right now on this. Much of CDPR's focus, according to several people who worked on Cyberpunk 2077, was on impressing the outside world. A slice of gameplay was showcased at E3, the industry's main trade event in 2018. It showed a main character embarking on a mission, giving players a grand tour of the city, crime-ridden Night City. Fans and journalists were wowed by Cyberpunk 2077's ambition and scale. What they didn't know was the demo was almost entirely fake. Now, that is also some more strong language from from um from Jason. Like if this sounded like to me, if this sounded like truthful, he would end the sentence with like some developers said, or a developer phrased it. You know, he would say it in like a non sort of like, he would say it in a very non quotable way, like a very hyperbolic way compared to what he just heard from the interview, you know? Um, the evidence he says here, it doesn't really make it sound like it was fake. It just makes it sound like a lot of it was fabricated, but that doesn't mean it was entirely fake. CD Projekt hadn't yet finalized and coded the underlying gameplay systems, which is why so many features such as car ambushes were missing from the final product. Developers said that they felt the demo was a waste of months that should have gone toward making the game. And I believe that, of course. Like, I think gameplay demos and public demos are like, it's just bullshit. It's all bullshit. It's all done to impress the outside world, like Jason phrases here. It doesn't, it should, that time should be going into the game, and actual demos should be shown when it's like a good representation of the game in its current state and the vision that they have for the game, and when the developers are comfortable with it. You shouldn't have to subvert specific development time specifically for an E3 demo. It's a waste of time, and it's all bullshit. But when he says it hadn't finalized and coded underlying gameplay systems, which so many features such as car ambushes were missing from the final product, like there are a lot of missing features from the game, but a lot of those features weren't shown in that demo. Basically, just like a lot of stuff is just from the demos, not in the final game. But some stuff that is in that demo is in the final game, and a lot of stuff that is in the final game wasn't in that demo. Is my point. Employees were working long hours, even though Ipinski told staff that overtime wouldn't be mandatory. More than a dozen workers said they felt pressured to put in extra hours by their managers or co-workers anyways. And there it is. More lies by CDPR. Just saying that it's a non-crunch environment. Overtime is not mandatory. And when it became mandatory, they informed the public. They said our final stretch is going to have some crunch. They told everybody that. But here, it doesn't even say when this pressure happened. It just sounds like this pressure was just consistent throughout the whole development cycle. And which I believe that in all AAA projects, crunch is just like this looming beast that just completely takes you over. Because if you don't give in to the beast, then the beast devours you. You lose bonuses. You lose contracts. You could get fired. You could get replaced. You could get downgraded to a different position. Like this shit happens so much that with a game of this scale, like the fact that they're saying that it was clear that that they were definitely crunching for a long time, even before they said they were, and it's just disappointing. There were times when I would crunch up to 13 hours a day. A little bit over that was my record probably, and I would do 5 days a week working like that, said Jakubik. The former audio programmer, adding that he quit the company after getting married. I have some friends who lost their families because of these sorts of shenanigans. He doesn't say that this specifically happened in CDPR, and there are a lot of studios in Poland, so he's probably referring to like different studios, but yeah, it does ruin people. Crunch does ruin people. In all industries too. It just takes over people's lives, and it ruins them simultaneously. Gives people all sorts of mental health issues, physical health issues, and yeah, it's just not on. CDPR just they're just contributing to this. They're touting themselves as some sort of industry leader, but really no, they're just about the same as everyone else. The overtime didn't make development of the game any faster. At E3 in June 2019, CDPR announced that the game would come out on April 16th. Fans were elated, but internally, some members of the team could only scratch their heads, wondering how they could possibly finish the game by then. One person said that they thought the date was a joke. Based on the team's progress, they expected the game to be ready by 2022. Developers created memes about the game getting delayed, making bets on when it would happen. So disappointing. Yeah, that date that Keanu announced at that E3 was a big fucking lie. And the fact that they announced and that was really the biggest, well, I'd say the second biggest problem next to the engine, is that they announced the date too early. And when they had to delay it a second time, it put more pressure on them when they had to delay it a third time. And it put more pressure on them when they had to delay it a fourth time. It should have just come out when it was ready. Like it's their motto, for fuck's sakes. It's their motto. And yet, they still had the nerve, the balls to announce this release date, and it fucked the development. It fucked the development when COVID happened. It fucked the development when the delays were coming in and the engine problems were happening and the director changes happened and the vision changes happened and the overhauls happened. They never should have announced this release date, ever. It was purely a marketing ploy, and it fucked the development for the game for the entire year. Cancelling features and scaling down the size of Cyberpunk's Metropolis helped, but the team's growth hampered some departments, developers said. The missing features were really just the only way they could get this game out in time. And I don't blame them. I don't blame them for scaling down the game, because the management had completely fucked them. Announcing that date and these engine upgrades fucked this development. It fucked it. It's still not as bad as Anthem, as some people are comparing it, in my eyes. But it's still really fucking bad for this studio of this caliber, with this amount of talent, with this vision and this scale. Management really fucked the game. by trying to just advertise it more than making the game. Well, The Witcher 3 was created by roughly 240 in-house staff, according to the company. Cyberpunk credits show the game had well over 500 internal developers, but CDPR wasn't accustomed to such a size. People who worked on the game said their teams often felt siloed and unorganized. Too many cooks. Classic tale. At the same time, CDPR remained understaffed. There are also cultural barriers brought about by hiring expats from US and Western Europe. Here's another big one. The studio mandated everyone speak English during meetings with non-Polish speakers, but not everyone followed the rules. You can't just force people to learn English during a fucking game development cycle. That is ridiculous. Not everyone has the fucking patience or the time to learn to speak English or get an interpreter. This thing is another thing that bothers the fuck out of me. You cannot just force. You live in Poland, for fuck's sakes. Poland. You speak Polish. Just because you're getting different English-speaking developers doesn't mean you need to make a Polish developer speak English. Just hire fucking interpreters for your English staff. Don't force your fucking mainland staff to speak English. That's fucking ridiculous to me. That's stupid. Even the timeline looked increasingly unrealistic. Management said during delaying wasn't an option. Their goal was to release Cyberpunk 2077 before new consoles. Why though? The ports aren't coming out until fucking September this year. Not everyone is going to have a fucking console. A new console. You saw what happened with the release of the new consoles. Scalpers up the wazoo. Limited supply, high demand. There was no reason for these things to coincide. It was a completely manufactured relation created by management, saying like, oh, they need to coincide. They don't. They seriously don't. The way the company could launch the game on existing PlayStation 4, some engineers realized that Cyberpunk was too complex of a game to run well on 7-year-old consoles. Even the developers knew. With its city full of bustling crowds and hulking buildings, they said management dismissed their concerns, however, citing their success in pulling off The Witcher 3. Here's another problem I have. Witcher 3 is a completely different world design to Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk is a seamless open world. Witcher 3 has open regions. Like there are multiple regions in The Witcher 3 that you need to load between. They're big regions, but they're also very flat and very wide, and they're segmented off in these regions. Cyberpunk is very tall, as well as very wide. It has way more NPC density than The Witcher 3, and it has way more complex systems, and your engine isn't even keeping up with your features that you're implementing. These comparisons are completely like apples and oranges. You cannot say that Witcher 3's success on old-gen consoles means that Cyberpunk will be any better. It just doesn't. It's apples and oranges. But by the end of 2019, management finally acknowledged that Cyberpunk needed to be delayed. Last January, the company pushed the game's release to September. In March, as the pandemic began ravaging the globe and forcing people to stay inside, CD Projekt Red staff had to complete the game in their homes, without access to the office's console's development kits. Most developers would play builds of the game on their home computers, so it wasn't clear to everyone how Cyberpunk might run on PS4 and Xbox One. They didn't even provide their staff development kits when they were working from home. Are you fucking kidding me? Marcin? Ivinsky? Are you listening? This is stupid. No one in their right mind would do this. You said in your apology video that dynamics got lost through emails and online meetings. That wasn't the problem. There were no dynamics that got lost. You didn't provide the equipment for your developers. That's why you were being so vague, because you didn't want to admit that you fucked up fucking catastrophically. You didn't want to admit that you wouldn't even bother to supply development kits to your own staff during COVID. As the launch date drew closer, everyone at the studio knew the game was in rough shape and needed more time. According to several people familiar with the development, that's the what I'm talking about. That's the language that Jason uses. He says, like, according to several people familiar with the development. You know, you would use some sort of like end sentence thing. Chunks of dialogue were missing. Some actions didn't work properly. When management announced in October that the game had gone gold, that was ready to be pressed to discs. There were still major bugs being discovered. The game was delayed another 3 weeks as exhausted programmers scrambled to fix as much as they could. Many of the glitches and graphical issues can be fixed, developers say, though it's not clear what it will take to regain a spot on the PlayStation Store. Winning back fans may be difficult. There's precedent in the video game world, like games like No Man's Sky and these other fucking games that bounced back. And the market seems to be hopeful. CD Projekt shares rose 6%, the most in 6 weeks, after Vinsky's message. Thank you very much, Jason, for this article. What can I say? The lies are more prevalent than was anticipated. Management was even more ignorant than I could have imagined. The implementation of features couldn't keep up with the upgrades of the engine. The development kits weren't supplied to their staff during COVID. The release date was announced way too early. Bloated development teams, immense amount of crunch. This game was ravaged by management. People that just didn't give or didn't have the foresight to see the consequences of their actions. They could not see, they refused to look ahead, to plan ahead. There was just so much that they didn't acknowledge in the apology, that they weren't upfront about, that they refused to accept this interview with Jason to clear up, because they knew that they were in the wrong. I am so disappointed in you, CDPR. I'm so disappointed. And it's a tale as old as time. The management just didn't know what they were doing. They didn't connect with the ground workers. They made it mandatory to speak English in meetings, for fuck's sakes. In Poland. Haven't they been through enough? Jesus. You have a fucking long way to go to win back your fan base, CDPR. And I hope you learn from this, and I hope that you treat your staff with the same amount of respect as you treated your fucking E3 demos, as you treated your fucking marketing campaigns and your marketing team. Thank you for watching. It's a sad day, but I can only hope that CDPR changes for the better from this. It is really, really difficult to see that, though. It seems that AAA development has just become a cesspool, a swamp, and it refuses to change. It seeps its way into developers that we can't even imagine it would seep its way into. It seems the only real hope for games these days is just independent development. Indie development is it's really the only place where games are made with their soul intact. Hades is a great example. Game of the Year contender. Zero crunch, and just positive stories around that game, just overall all around. Vote with your wallets, people. Let the industry know we cannot stand this any longer. Refund your games. Refund your copies of Cyberpunk. Don't send friggin' hate comments or don't send death threats to the friggin' developers. They didn't do anything. It's the management, and anyone in charge is subject to ridicule because it's their job to work for us. Marcin Nowitzki works for CD Projekt Red staff and for the consumers. He doesn't work for himself. Anyways. Thank you for watching. If you liked it, like it. If you'd like the channel to grow, share it. And thank you for watching. Catch you next time.